good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are. So pleased to have you all here again, and pleased to see some new faces. So today we'll be looking at typical injuries, sources of injuries, management of injuries, prevention of injuries in class, part 2. And we're going to be looking at the typical sources of injuries of the pelvis and the knees and the ankles today. That's a lot of ground to cover, so I'll be moving rather briskly, but as ever, I want to invite you to interject with questions. If you have questions as slides and ideas are rolling along, the easiest way to do that is register your questions through the chat panel to the side of your screen. Saraswati will be monitoring that chat panel and keep me apprised of questions as they arise. So, opening the gates. So the first thing I want to look at is vulnerabilities of the pelvic girdle. Wait, now I'm trying to get to my side screen here where I can see that's what keeps me now what? And I've lost my bloody cursor. Oh, I know what I need to do. I need to escape. Yes, let's all escape. All right. So the first thing I want to take a look at today is the pelvic girdle, of enormous significance to all of our movement, our posture, our arrangement and gravity. And the first thing I want to notice is that the pelvic girdle is at the center of our bodies, and it is by far the largest and densest bone of our entire skeleton. This is for a reason. Bones are larger and denser primarily because they are going to receive more muscle attachments. So the space of the pelvis, the wide blades, front and back, the ischium down here, all are anchor points for muscles that go all the way up to our upper torso and all the way down below our ankles. And it is the densest bone in the body because all of these muscular attachments from top to knees are going to have to encounter the most gravitational stress of any bone in our body. So it really is the linchpin for the core of our body and the linchpin for all of our movements and our rearrangements in gravity as we tilt this way and that, walk, move. And the pelvis is the architectural foundation of the spine and the bridge that distributes weight to the legs in all of our movements. So if we take a look at lines of stress running down through from the entire spine and rib cage and shoulder girdle complex, down through the pelvis and the sacrum, and distributing that upper body weight to the legs, and from the legs upward, supporting the pelvis with all the musculature of the legs, as we're going to see as we go along. And of key importance to this architecture, both weight support coming from above and gravitational support coming from below. The key bone to our sacrum here in its arrangements in space is the sacrum. We'll be taking a closer look at that sacrum and its roles and its potential problems. But I think it's very nice that even as modern Western anatomy has used this nomenclature to call this sacrum the sacrum, And in the ancient languages, in a more ancient perspective of all this, they've preserved in the very new naming of this bone the sense that it is the sacred bone. It is right down here, associated with our first chakra and our entire life force, our survival at its basest level. And it is the key support bone for all of this weight and the distribution of all this stability coming from the bottom. So I think it's quite nice that the modern nomenclature has preserved this sense of, in many ways, the sacredness of this bone to our first chakra, to our second chakra of first chakra, preserving self, second chakra, preserving the species, and it is a sacred area of our bodies, this pelvic bowl. So as we take a little further back look at those stresses and strains that can come through this pelvic bone, pelvic region, the lumbar spine, there are a number of ways to disturb the distribution of upper body weight and support from below and the bridge of our legs as we look at deviations of something off of the mobile ideal of a spinal posture and distribution of weight through the legs. You can see in this picture that as I favor the weight on one leg, it tends to drop the other leg, and that dropping of the pelvis towards this side rearranges the pelvis, the sacrum, from a nice flat keel here in our balanced posture to a tilt of that keel support surface of the sacrum. And that tilting of the sacrum requires then an entire rearrangement of the spine so that my upper body is not leaning over to the side. In order to get my upper body back towards an upright posture with this tilted pelvis, this is what has to happen to my whole spine. Those of you who were with us last time, you'll remember the somewhat of a structural catastrophe I've got down here in my low back, both from congenital missing of some skeletal support and all the stresses and strains that that's put on my sacrum and my low back to beef all this area up with a great deal of connective tissue. I got one of the biggest surprises in my life in a chiropractor's office once when she asked me to step on two identical scales and just have me look forward, shift my weight around, and come back to my own feeling of familiar norm. And I looked down at those scales, and there was 40 pounds difference of the weight I was carrying on one leg as opposed to the other leg. So this shift in imbalance in my sacrum and low back up here created a 40-pound difference in the weight distributed to my legs and feet. That means that all the bones of that more supportive leg were more, the muscles were larger, more developed, the bones were thicker, and on the unweighted side, bones were thinner and the musculature less developed. So this set in motion an entire skeletal and muscular rearrangement of my supportive leg structure, which then became part and parcel of that tilted posture that I developed from the problems in my own low back and spine down here, lower spine and sacrum arrangement down here. Now this picture is addressing the side-to-side discrepancies I may have in the postural arrangement of my graceful distribution of weight in gravity through my skeletal and muscular system. There is another way to rearrange the distribution of weight going through this key muscular and skeletal structure down here, and that's this upper body slump. We're going to be looking more carefully at what happens to the sacrum and the psoas and the carriage of the pelvis in space with this upper body slump. But I just want to remind you that up here in my thoracic spine, this upper body slump and the cantilevering of my head forward and the collapse of my rib cage makes a dramatic increase of pounds per square inch on the discs and the muscular structures in my thorax.